Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Here's some of the top stories that we're covering. The U.S. national debt hits $35 trillion. This is not a one-party problem. I've heard a pundit recently comment that the service on the national debt next year will exceed the amount that we put into national defense. Part of my concern is I don't hear either political party campaigning on a basis of controlling the national debt. I'm very concerned about it, not just for our children and our children's children, but for the current generation. And remember, this is on top of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security running out of money. We have some serious financial situations going on, and America's politicians are not dealing with it. China's expanding Arctic ambitions challenge the U.S. and NATO. This is a mega story for the foreseeable future. Xi is an ambitious fool. However, as they say, never take fools lightly. The CCP is doing its best to ruin the economy of mainland China. Showing these displays of force are designed to keep the average person in China focused on something other than the failing economy and the incredible demographic results of the one-child policy. We know that China wants a nuclear sub in the Arctic. If USA and NATO allow this, this could portend a significant change in the balance of power, a change nobody in the free world can allow. The United States needs to exercise its territorial jurisdiction and make sure that doesn't happen. Speaking of the free world being challenged, U.S. and Canadian fighter jets had to scramble Russian and Chinese nuclear bomb-capable bombers near the U.S. Arctic area. This is sovereign U.S. land. Frankly, I would like to see a stronger response by the U.S. and its allies. How about forcing these enemy planes to land and arresting their crews? These countries would not hesitate to do that if a U.S. plane crew traveled into their national waters or national airspace. It is time to get tough, which is difficult to say when you've got a clown like Biden in the White House. Speaking of clowns, Blinken, our alleged Secretary of State, says Iran is only a few weeks away from having a nuclear bomb. As usual with the incompetent Biden administration, they have done nothing to stop the Iranians. Massive sanctions need to be placed on Iran until it is broke. This backwards country needs a good slapdown. The U.S. tolerates endless public statements about destroying the U.S. and Israel by Iran's deranged leaders. It is time to get tough in response. A very sad story. An Iranian-made rocket launched by Hezbollah killed 12 children playing soccer in northern Israel. 29 other people were hospitalized. The children killed were part of the Druze people. This is a unique sect in that they are Arabs who are not Muslims. So the terrorists now claim that they were trying to hit an Israeli military base. Of course, I find it offensive that people are protesting against Israel when it was the one attacked on October 7th. Over 100 hostages may still be held in horrendous conditions in Gaza. Israel has done all it can to defend itself and not hurt Gazan civilians. So it's okay for the terrorists to target non-combatants, but not Israel. A ridiculous position. While Netanyahu was speaking to Congress, a bunch of violent demonstrators took down 3 American flags, burned them, put up terrorist flags, and caused all sorts of mayhem. Now, this takes resources, folks. You may not realize it, but you don't suddenly have a paper mache a big figure of Netanyahu to burn if you don't have the resources to start with. I suspect that these gullible fools are being funded by Iran in some fashion. And I believe that is against federal law, but I don't know that the Biden administration is doing anything about it. Now, there were only 29 police officers available to work on this. Why was the National Guard not called out? This should have been all hands on deck. Biden will announce the Supreme Court reforms next week. Folks, I just find this story so rich when this fool has been on the public dole for 50 years and he wants limits for SCOTUS, but he hasn't brought up limits for Congress or ethical rules for Congress. I have previously expressed my support for ethics rules for SCOTUS. Same rules should apply across the U.S. government. It's time to get on board, clean up the act. Let's put term limits in for everybody. Let's get rid of lifetime pensions. Let's put in some hardcore ethics rules. And if you're only serving in Congress for a few years, it's not hard to comply with those ethics rules, like not having stock that you know about in particular companies and things like that. Hey, Nancy Pelosi, pay attention. On term limits, the general idea, the reason that federal judges serve for life was to prevent them from being biased, so that they would not be shopping for their next job, and also that they would not say, well, gee, if my term ends, people might get even with me because I voted a certain way. This was designed to be truly independent. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has been somewhat compromised since the administration of FDR in the 1930s and early 1940s. And as we all know, they tried to pack the court. There's been some rumors about the Dems wanting to pack the court. I don't see that happening before the end of the year. If Kamala Harris was to, by some freak of nature or voting cheating, was to be elected, I think that they could go after the Supreme Court and either pack the court or do something else that's stupid. The oddity of this is that the Dems are simply playing politics. In a recent survey, only 20% of the decisions of the current term of SCOTUS could be considered political. And in fact, many of the decisions were unanimous. So as we say, be careful what you wish for. All of the slopstream media seems to want to talk about regarding J.D. Vance is to repeat his recent comment about women who do not want to have children. I do not share his opinion on that, but there's a lot more to this candidate. Vance served in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2007. He was deployed to Iraq for 6 months during that period. After graduating from Ohio State University in 2009 and Yale Law School in 2013, he worked at a venture capital firm briefly. He then started his own venture capital firm. This is a bright, ambitious person. He became somewhat famous when his book, Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of family and culture in crisis, was published in 2016. It was later made into a movie. I have not read the book. I've not seen the movie, but I understand it details the struggles he faced growing up with poverty, an addicted mother. His grandmother, who was deeply religious, raised him and imbued him with certain key principles. He became a senator in Ohio by defeating an incumbent Democrat in 2022. I would say his opinions are conservative, moderate. This is not your run-of-the-mill, all right-side politics are right. Like me, he emphasizes that America needs to focus on the threat from communist China and North Korea. He is a man of strong faith. He has just turned 40, so a young candidate these days, and he and his wife have 3 young children. But he expresses his religious beliefs openly, and I believe that's a positive in a world that needs to have some ethical guidance. We've got a quick wounded update from the Trump rally. I'm pleased to say that the 2 men who were seriously wounded, in addition to the murder of Corey Comparatori, have recovered enough to leave the hospital. Generous donations to a GoFundMe for the 3 men and their families has reached $6 million. Former Kentucky Attorney General warns about threats to business from woke corporations. As we watch the mass migration of businesses from California and the Northeast, I believe that business leaders are paying attention to each state's approach to business. Remember, it is not just the business itself, it's their employees, vendors, and investors. Another reminder comes from former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Claremont. He recently spoke with the Daily Signal, where he expressed concern that many publicly traded companies are no longer focusing on return on investments to shareholders. He is quoted, "We don't need companies built on diversity, equity, inclusion. We need companies built on excellence, merit, and intelligence." Hey, sounds like good advice to me. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is trying to crack down on so-called whistleblowers who are exposing gender medicine. And what we're seeing here with HHS is they're going after a whistleblower doctor named Ethan Haim, who exposed the fact that Texas Children's Hospital in Houston was still providing to minors gender change medical services, despite the fact that this violates Texas state law. The HHS is claiming that Dr. Haim violated the federal HIPAA privacy law. However, he stated in reply it was his moral responsibility to expose what was happening to these children. Note that medical research would grind to a halt if the HHS interpretation of HIPAA is used. HIPAA prohibits the disclosure of PPI, patient's personally identifiable information. Other data is allowed. So as long as the names and identity of the children here were not disclosed, this does not violate HIPAA based on my own understanding of the facts here and the law itself. My audience knows that I do not oppose gender reassignment procedures, only that they should not be performed on minors. Minors are still developing how they feel about life, what's happening, and I think if they get through puberty and all that, and they still want to do a gender reassignment, that they should be allowed to do it as an adult under normal rules, which should include psychological counseling. A 134-year-old American furniture chain is closing down all 553 stores. Now, that's the headline, but there's a little discrepancy about what's really happening. Conn's Furniture, which is based in Texas, has been struggling like many American retail businesses. The competition is intense and the cost of doing business is high. Originally, Conn's announced they would go Chapter 11 bankruptcy and close non-performing stores. Sadly, the later announcement was that they were entering Chapter 11, but closing all of their stores since they've been unable to obtain interim financing. I note that part of the issue is covering the cost of a recent acquisition. This continues to be a pattern with a number of these companies that were doing okay. They then acquire a business and they're getting hit by these high interest rates that we're all facing, and they're unable to service the debt on the acquisitions. So I'm not exactly sure what's happening. I've seen other reports that say Conn's will only close 71 stores. But if you don't have the money to keep buying inventory and keep things rolling, I'm not sure how they would continue to do that. And remember, Chapter 11 is known as the business reorganization part of our U.S. bankruptcy code, and it's designed to provide shelter to a business while it gets its act together and moves forward with future financing. However, there's also something called a liquidating Chapter 11, the idea being that the business can get a better price and perhaps give a few dollars to its shareholders if it liquidates in a orderly manner. So we're still going to have to wait to see what happens there. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. The Fox headline reads, Huntington Beach middle school student expelled over unpresented patriotism speech. Yes, folks, our Saving America A grade goes to Jimmy Hayward and his family who supported him. You see, Jimmy was running for class office at the St. Bonaventure School in communist-controlled California. He never got to present the speech at all. The speech was screened by the principal. Since it called for patriotism and then mimicking the MAGA campaign, he closed with making his school great again. The principal, who is not a member of the clergy or a nun, as far as I know, vetoed the speech before he could give it. Gets better, folks. The family was then told that Jimmy and his younger and older sisters, who were also at the school, were terminated from the school as well. That's a pretty interesting thing, folks. A speech that was never given got young Jimmy and both of his sisters expelled from a Catholic school. The school's defense, I'll quote, is, "We will continue our Christ-centered, faith-based mission of fostering an environment where every student can thrive spiritually and academically." Folks, I attended Catholic school K through 8th grade. I teach at a Catholic university. I have never, ever heard that Christ and being a patriotic American are mutually exclusive. In fact, I believe that Christ would support a country that brought prosperity and freedom, including religious freedom, to its citizens. Therefore, Saving America awards Jimmy Hayward and his whole family a coveted Saving America A grade. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Saving America welcomes Dom Einhorn, who comes to us from his home base in Sarlat, France. Incredibly, at 23, moved to the US and created a successful .com startup. He sold that, and in 2001, he moved back to France. He is a serial entrepreneur and CEO of many companies, including digital media, technology, and others. He speaks an amazing 6 languages, including Alsatian. Among his accomplishments, he's the founder and CEO of Unicorn, that's spelled with a Q. This is the largest rural incubator accelerator in the world. I found so much information on the various companies that he started that I really had to edit this down so I could structure my intro and have time for my 3 questions. We welcome Dom Einhorn for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Well, we'll jump right in. With your terrific record, what is your advice for other entrepreneurs out there, especially those who are interested in tech ventures?
Well, as you know, tech is pretty much all I've done my entire life. I don't know how to do anything else. I have a very peculiar interest. I've never golfed in my life. I played darts once in my life against my old partner who challenged me to a game of darts that, by the way, he lost, even though I had never played. So I guess I made my point there. But when it comes to tech, I've been in tech business since 1993. Clearly, tech has evolved dramatically since that time. It's always moved fast, but it tends to move faster and faster. And the closer you seem to be getting to the horizon, the more it shifts away. So I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to any entrepreneur in the space, as well as to any investor, is to not focus on what changes, but instead focus on what does not change. And that's usually where we see the real opportunity. Now, what doesn't change? People tend to change a lot less or a lot less faster than technology does. So communities, for example, when you're building a business, a B2C business, business to consumer business online, for example, you're trying to engage with the people, you're trying to retain people, you're trying to nurture people. That sense of community, in my book, is more important than it's ever been. No matter how much the technology changes, no matter how we engage with people. So the early days of the internet, before the Facebooks, before the Instagrams, before the LinkedIns, before any kind of social media, we had bulletin boards. I'm now talking years, for those that are old enough to remember, 1992, 1996-ish. We had news groups. People were engaging using primarily text. Then they were engaging using images as the technology would mature. And then in the early to mid 2000s, a little bit of video, more and more video. Now you have TikTok that you guys might be banning soon in the US, which is video only. But at the core of this, despite the technology changing, the willingness of people to engage into meaningful interactions, into conversations, that never changes, never has changed. Storytelling, we've been telling each other stories since the first campfire, I guess, or even before the campfire. That becomes more and more important. So when you're looking at building a business, the best recommendation I could make is focus on what doesn't change, what will be here tomorrow, because none of us have a crystal ball to predict the future.
Well, I think that's very sage advice. And in fact, in order to make sure I made the time this morning, I skipped my technology networker at the new ION Center here in Houston, which is sponsored by Rice University. And it's very interesting to have people like me who are consultants to business meeting with what are, generally speaking, some very young entrepreneurs. Some of them have, college age, a couple even high school age. So it's a very dynamic time in the world. Let's switch gears a little bit here in our question number 2. You are also an active investor in sports franchises, including previously a semi-professional rugby club. What attracts your interest in sports franchises and rugby in particular?
I think it's a great transition from the first question. I don't think there is too much of a dichotomy between the first and the second question. It goes back to community. Where do you find the most engaged communities? The most loyal communities in sports. I talk to you're in Texas, Dallas Cowboy fan, right? Obviously, those go way beyond Texas because we have them in France as well. I grew up as a Raider fan. I still am. Lord forbid, it's been over 20 years since I've had some satisfaction on the field. Yet I'm still a Raider fan. And what attracted me to the Raiders very early on is I was very sensitive to brand. Right. So, for example, here's a brand. Here's a rugby team, our local rugby team in Haguenau, France, right here, for those who have video. Okay. Yeah. And something we're going to talk about a little bit later on the back end. Right. So what's interesting about sports is that you can directly engage with a fan base. You can carry a message that's a sports message, tag along a sponsor message in a very organic way, in a way in which it resonates. So and now I'm talking primarily about amateur sports and semi-professional sports. When you go into pure play pro sports, it tends to get a little different. But at an earlier stage, if you're looking at an amateur sports team, it's typically run like an amateur startup. You have a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that work for free, some of which have been with the team for 30, 40 years. They only have the team's best interest in mind, clearly, because they're not getting paid. Yes. They're diehard fans. They will do anything for this team to, in many cases, survive, because the team has very little in terms of means. And then as a corporate brand, you can identify these niches, these pockets of opportunity, step in, sometimes for very little money, and help that team grow while growing your own brand. So the local team here in Haguenau, northeastern France, we've been with now for just a little over a year, that we invested in. We completely redid their entire brand, their jerseys, the derivative products, like the one that's right on this table here, mouse pads, bags, jerseys, the whole gamut, with a redrawn brand, which is their own, which is a historic brand. The club's been around for 50 years. And tag along our brand, Masters of Trivia, and growing them together in a very symbiotic way. Every time their brand is shown, ours is shown. Every time ours is shown, theirs is shown. It's also shown in a way that's engaging to the fan base, that's engaging to the press. So every Sunday, typically, or every Monday, sorry, because the games are on Sunday, the weekend games are covered in the press, on social media, and you can measure the impact that you have for your own brand, and you can measure the ROI, the return on investment, or what we call the return on brand, the ROB. You can measure it down to the dollar. There's software today that allows you to see how many times the human eye on social media, or when they're looking up the pictures of the weekend game, has seen your brand and put a value on that and calculate what the ROI is depending on the ad spend that you allocated towards that effort. And what we found out, and that's to answer the second part of the question, why rugby, is that if you look at sports in general, according to our research, internal research, and we spend a lot of time on that, the number one sport in the world in terms of ROI, sponsorship ROI, is ping pong, table tennis.
Okay.
When we saw that, we were like, wait a second, how is that? And you know, I have a late brother who was a businessman as well. He would only sponsor table tennis, and he had told me this already 10, 15 years ago, and I kind of brushed it by the wayside and said he probably had one too many drinks to tell me this today because it was on a weekend. And it turns out it was right. So if we take, but very often it's due to extreme examples. So let's take one example. During COVID, we all remember COVID.
Yes.
We all remember that all sports games were literally banned as a result of contact, human contact. When that happened, in places like ESPN, pure play sports channels panic, right? We had all these games planned. Now we get nothing to show. What do we show? What's going on? What do we have in our library? What can we show the people? What's engaging? Oh, we have the World Championship for ping pong from last year. Ping pong is always interesting to watch for anyone, whether we like it or not, right? But now behind that table with the camera angle straight on it, you have now a game that's never been seen before where 2, 3, 4 million people per week watch now these World Championship tennis ping pong organization, and the sponsor behind the table spent $3,000 to have their sign there and getting millions of dollars worth of exposure. So you have dramatic ROI, dramatic ROB, return on brand, as a result of this once in a lifetime lucky event. Lucky, I put this in brackets clearly because it was during COVID. The second sport that comes close to ping pong is rugby. Here I'm going to take another example, driven purely by metrics. If you're looking, for example, at the French national soccer team, as you call it in the US, soccer versus football, even though we play with a foot, you typically, now we have the Euro Cup going on as we speak. France is qualified for the round of 16, which they will play on Monday against Belgium. There will be roughly 12 to 15 million people, French people, watching that game, give or take. The rugby team tonight, which is the final between Toulouse and Bordeaux for what's called top 14, top tier, the equivalent of the NFL in the US, will be roughly watched by 8 million people. So give or take a little bit more than half the soccer. But the 30-second TV spot on the soccer game costs 50 times more than the 30-second spot on the rugby game.
Fantastic.
Why is that? Major delta. Well, the reason is what we call in the advertising business the upfronts. The first one is sold upfront, as the name indicates, ahead of time, a year ago, just like the Super Bowl spots that are going for $7 million a piece.
Right.
Where all of the big brands, primarily consumer brands, the Procter & Gamble's of the world, the largest spender, advertising spender in the world, will outbid each other to be in that spot because there's a finite amount of those 30-second spots to buy.
Absolutely.
The rugby is not sold this way. It's on a first come, first sold basis. So you don't have this inflation going on. Yet you're reaching the exact same person, the exact same butt is sitting in front of the TV station. In this case, mine. I will be watching both games. So why is it that my butt in the chair watching the football game, the soccer game, costs 50 times more than my butt in the chair watching the rugby game? It makes no sense whatsoever. The impression is exactly the same. So we're looking for these opportunities. And in amateur sports, you have massive opportunity for investment. I would recommend any serious brand that's looking to generate positive, strong ROI on their brand to follow a similar path. If you need help with how to do it, you can contact me.
That is incredible. And by the way, Houston, Texas, where I am, has just announced that, and it's out in a suburban location, is the Houston SaberCats.
I follow them. I follow them on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are, and I met with their. He's now part of my LinkedIn loop. Is their head of promotion. So it's interesting because it's just hitting in Houston also. Let's move on to number 3. One of your newest ventures ties in with the growing interest in trivia. Tell us about Masters of Trivia, which I hear you put on a shelf 20 years ago, but you booted it up last year. And of course, you showed us your drinking bottle next to you with the Masters of Trivia on it.
Yeah, this one right here.
Right.
So trivia is very interesting. It's a very interesting topic. I've been a trivia fanatic since a very early age. I used to compete in quiz contests in a format where you'd get hit up on any topic in 5 different languages. You wouldn't know which topic would come next and in which language it would come to you. So it's the ultimate in terms of multitasking. But at the most granular level, what's really exciting and fascinating about trivia, it's the core unit of knowledge. In other words, if we're looking at our own discovery path online, if we have a question in our minds today, what we do is we typically type it into Google. If we're looking for George Washington's birthday, we're going to take the answer because it's going to be immediate, boom, and we're going to be happy with that because it's the only thing we're looking for. But if we're looking for Ronald Reagan's curriculum, we're going to have to dig deeper. We're going to see his birthday. We're going to click likely on Wikipedia. Wikipedia giving us an encyclopedia knowledge on pretty much anything. And that we're going to sift through and maybe find what we're looking for, maybe not. In all likelihood, we will find it. However, there is a missing piece to the puzzle, which is how do we test our own knowledge against any topic? What if we had a de facto Wikipedia-like resource that allows us at the most granular level, be it a butterfly, a bird, an American president, a football team, an obscure topic in another language, a systematic way of testing our knowledge on that topic, learning as we go in a gamified way. This is really what we're setting out to do, basically helping the world become smarter on any topic. Today, you may have seen it earlier today, we celebrated Mike Tyson's ear biting of Evander Holyfield, which happened on June 28, 1997, believe it or not, 27 years ago. So for those who remember that event, that was almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago today. So in this case, we use that as the hook. It's a bite, but we can call it a hook, a marketing hook to draw people in. Oh yeah, I remember this event. And then here is a 23 question quiz about Mike Tyson. You can test your knowledge about what you remember about him, what you know about him. But the objective is to do this on millions of topics, on any topic under the sun, in any language under the sun. So it's an absolute massive undertaking. On the same lines, we're organizing the first European Quiz Championships. I don't think I mentioned this to you, but this is an event.
I haven't heard this yet. Go ahead.
I will invite you to. It will take place in our neck of the woods here in northeastern France in Alsace. The website is currently under construction. It will be quiz67.com. 67 is the name of our department. France is divided by departments. And it will bring together over a Saturday, Sunday, players from around the world, primarily European, that will compete on Saturday in a confined environment in the massive sports hall against each other. And then on Sunday, the following day, we will open up the winners who will then compete against the rest of the world in a hybrid format, both online and in the physical presence, with a massive screen where people can follow what's going on. We're going to provide more context prior to every quiz contest, meaning that if you're playing a quiz about the Civil War, you will get a 3-minute clip playing first to draw the people in, to give them more context, rather than taking the average Frenchman who knows nothing about the Civil War and just parachuting them into a quiz about the Civil War, which would make no sense.
Yes.
And we're going to do this in French, in German, in English, and in Alsatian, which is our local language.
Yes.
So that's going to be the gist of the event. But coming back to the trivia itself, it's also a massive business opportunity, which ties together with your first and your second question. In other words, tech, sports, and masters of trivia. How do they all tie together? Well, if you can target a user down to the most granular level, and you look at these unit economics, and you're knowing that you can create a quiz on any topic under the sun, in any language under the sun, you can pick any. You can drive community to that topic, because no matter how targeted that interest is, let's say fly fishing, not in general, but fly fishing in northeastern Montana, you will have a community of fly fishermen in northeastern Montana that you can target with a quiz that's specifically built for that purpose. And then you can tie in local guides, fly fishermen from northeastern Montana that will want to sponsor that quiz with pinpoint accuracy, content and context. When you're going to that guide, today, he's probably using some Facebook ads, he's probably using some Google ads, maybe some other venues, but very often he's challenged to find the right medium that is perfectly aligned with his line of business. That is no longer the problem here with what we're setting up to do. We can give him the perfect context and the perfect content and align them both together and make them both resonate without turning off the user. Because if you're, as we all know, very often when we like content, we're annoyed by the advertising that's superimposed on top of that content.
Absolutely.
But if that content, if that context is perfectly aligned with the content, if I'm playing that fly fishing trivia quiz about Montana, and the ad that's rolling right next to it is a fly fisherman from northeastern Montana, I'm not going to be turned off by it. I might actually click on it. I might actually contact it.
Dom, we could do this for hours. As you know, we talked before we began recording, and we have so much to talk about. But like I said, we try and keep this to a certain length so that people will actually watch this fascinating interview. I know I'm looking forward to seeing this again. Tell people, how can they get more information about you? Where should they go?
Probably the easiest way is the way you found me, is on LinkedIn. So
okay,
I believe I'm the only Dom Einhorn, D-O-M, not Don, not with an N, with an M like Mary, Einhorn, yes. E-I-N-H-O-R-N. And from there on, you'll find the links to Masters of Trivia, our website, and everything else.
Fantastic. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Politics and the law overlap in this highly publicized case against former President Donald Trump for alleged election interference in Georgia. He's actually been charged under the RICO statutes, which makes it a very interesting case of criminal law. Even if Trump is elected president, due to this being a state-filed case, he could not pardon himself out of it, I've heard separately. Well, some may recall the popular play that was later a successful movie, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Well, that farce was set at the pinnacle of ancient Rome. So this new episode might be titled, "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to a Trial." Trump's defense team challenged the legitimacy of Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and the special prosecutor that she hired, Nathan Wade, to whom she has reportedly paid already about $600,000 of public money. Now, that in itself would not be a crime. However, there was a court hearing where she and Wade were forced to admit that they had been openly dating. However, their testimony was that they did not date until 2022, after Wade took over the case against Trump. Willis has also claimed to have covered her half of numerous out-of-town trips that they took together, meaning that public money paid to Wade was not subsidizing her lifestyle. There were no receipts, as she claims she was always reimbursing Wade in cash. Now, I personally listened to some of her testimony on this point. Sorry, folks, my truth detector was in the red zone. The problem is that the facts, including cell phone evidence that puts Wade near Willis's condo for what some have indelicately described as booty calls 35 different times, many prior to the start of the case against Trump. There were also over 2,000 voice calls and just under 12,000 text messages between the two in 2021, again, the year before the case was filed. And it further calls into the question the timeline of the intimate relationship. So if it turns out that the two lied under oath about the timing and extent of their relationship, they could be prosecuted for this. Penalties could include losing their law licenses and even jail time. This attorney's opinion is that the former is more likely than the latter, but let's see how it goes. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez is convicted for corruption. Menendez, a Democrat, is a senator for New Jersey. Menendez was charged with 16 criminal charges, including bribery, acting as a foreign agent, and obstructing justice. This bizarre case followed a similar but narrower trial on corruption in 2017 that ended in a hung jury. Most Americans became aware of the new case when a raid at his home with wife Nadine found $480,000 in cash and some gold bars. It was also alleged that he had received cars and mortgage payments from the three businessmen who wanted his help. Alleged was that in exchange for these bribes, Menendez was helping to steal billions of dollars in American aid to Egypt. The reason was that businessman Wael Hanna had ties to the government. He was also accused of seeking to influence criminal probes of two other businessmen, Fred Daibes and Jose Uribe. Hanna and Daibes were co-defendants in the senator's trial. Uribe pleaded guilty and testified as a prosecution witness against Menendez. As they say, no honor among thieves, folks. The jury deliberated for 12 hours over 3 days to reach a decision, finding him guilty on all counts. Menendez has consistently refused to resign from the Senate, although he has surrendered his seat as chair of the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Following his conviction, Chuck Schumer has called for him to resign. However, he apparently has claimed that the Senate does not have a procedure to expel a senator. The reason this came up is that, in contrast, last year, Congressman from New York, George Santos, a Republican, was expelled from the House of Representatives by its Republican majority. Menendez has promised to appeal. However, the nature of the jury verdict and the involved co-defendant who testified against him at trial makes that unlikely to produce a reversal. We shall see. We try to stay very, very current on the news. Sometimes our stories are a few days later, but I hope people feel that they are more thought out since they're not run on the same day. And we're, of course, very interested in Kamala Harris and what she is doing on her campaign now that Biden has stepped away. And so during our broadcast, we'll be speaking about her and her campaigns, of course. And in particular, right now, we're concerned about the fact that she is running what is somewhat parallel to the 2020 campaign of Joe Biden that was called the basement campaign. I'm expecting that Kamala is not going to be able to run a basement campaign. The GOP is wasting its breath complaining about the switch from Biden to Harris. Time to focus on the worst candidate either party has run. Hey, since Biden himself. There's zero positive track record for this person. This is a gift, and the GOP should just shut up and run over her and stop worrying about, oh my God, democracy was ruined because nobody voted for her. Hey, the people voted in Democrat primaries voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. Yes, which means they voted for Harris along with Biden. Stop talking about that. Focus on the issues, folks. So Kamala Harris campaign raises more than $100 million very quickly. That's right, folks. Every whack lefty wants to make sure the American people cannot take back the country after the hard left have controlled everything under Biden the demented. We now have Kamala the incompetent. Let's look at her laundry list. Border failure, number one. She had one real responsibility and she failed in dramatic fashion. Why should anyone vote for her when this is the number one issue for many voters? And we've faced a rash of drugs, crime, and human trafficking that the Biden-Harris administration has brought about through their open borders policy. To compound the matter, at one point, she actually advocated to get rid of Customs and Border Patrol. Yeah, CBP. Oh, how wonderful that would be. She has lied for 4 years about the mental condition of Joe Biden, going back to when he ran his so-called basement campaign in 2020. Harris is part of the biggest cover-up in the White House since 1918, the last year of the Wilson administration, when he had suffered a stroke, and reportedly his wife actually ran the White House for the last year of the Wilson administration. Folks, that was 106 years ago. And again, there have been plenty of cover-ups. This is the biggest one since then, in my opinion, and the opinion of many other pundits. How can you trust someone to manage the federal bureaucracy when she has terrible relations with her own staff? Of the 47 Harris staffers listed in 2021, only 5 still work for her as of this spring, according to various disclosures. This is a 90% turnover rate. Generally speaking, as a manager, we would have fired this person well before they got to 10 or 11%, much less 90%. She wants to ban fracking, which is essentially taking old or low-producing wells and extracting more fuel. It's a tried and true technique as of today. It has helped give America energy independence. Why would the Dems want to block that? She supported terrorists who destroyed American cities. That's right, she was raising money for bail for the violent scum who burned police stations, destroyed cars, and wrought ruin on numerous American cities. She supported no bail laws. These have failed everywhere that they've been tried. She supported letting criminals out on the street, including a murderer. While not a focal point of her public visibility, when questioned on her views, she is a true commie, or during the Cold War, we called them dirty commies. She will not follow the Constitution. She is frequently taking positions that violate the Constitution. She has telegraphed her anti-Semitism when she recently refused to meet with Netanyahu when he spoke to Congress. She has supported another crazy concept called Medicare for All. This ludicrous proposal is estimated to cost $35 trillion, which, by the way, folks, is the current level of the existing national debt. Nationalized healthcare is a failure everywhere. Plus, Medicare is about to run out of money. Oh, that's right, she's a Dem. They don't care about the national debt and running out of money. Time to pay the piper, folks. For the record, I support the USA having a woman president. Examples of outstanding women leaders from elsewhere include the great Margaret Thatcher in England, and Golda Meir in Israel. Italy now has its first woman president. We have great female leaders in this country, too many to name, but Harris is definitely not one of the great women leaders of America. The U.S. Postal Service just announced another increase in first-class postage. Why? The USPS, the acronym for the United States Postal Service, is the worst-run operation of a poorly run government entity known as the U.S. bureaucracy. And it recently announced it's losing $1 billion this year. Why? Because we are sending less mail, and that is their excuse for raising the rates. Now, how about having less employees? If you have less business, go ahead and have less employees, have less overhead like a regular business would have. I proposed a solution to the postal crisis some time back. I'm going to repeat it now. It's the Schein plan. The clowns of both political parties haven't been paying enough attention. Hopefully they will this time. Number one, bulk rate postage must come up to cover the full cost of the U.S. Postal Service. Most of what's being delivered today are packages as a contractor for Amazon and other companies, which ought to be at full cost, and bulk rate postage. Most of my mail, over 90%, goes directly into the shred or the recycling bin. This is not reasonable to give them 20 cents or 26 cents a piece when we're now going to pay 70 cents a piece for mail that costs the same amount physically to deliver to your door. Number two, we can cut delivery to more practical levels. So few people are receiving real mail today because so much is being sent via electronic mail that we don't need 6-day-a-week delivery. Recently, Congress, for some reason, endorsed 6-day delivery, despite the fact that it makes no sense in 2023, and it hasn't made any sense pretty much since 2010 or even earlier. It's time to cut it 4 days a week in business districts, the 4 of the 5 weekdays, and for residences, 3 days a week and Saturday. And I think we will have handled most of this. In terms of package delivery, you know what? Package delivery needs to be compensed at the fair rate, or let the UPS and the other competing services, United Parcel Service, FedEx, so forth, take care of their own business and not put the lower value, lower profits deliveries out to our postal service that we're paying for indirectly, of course, from our tax dollars. And number four, stop kowtowing to the postal unions. They can't strike, they're a federal union. Start looking at what we're paying them in pay and especially benefits. This is out of control. Folks, these are low skill and semi-skilled jobs in large part. We do not need to be paying these people the kind of money and benefits that they're getting today. Time to cut the nonsense and make it fair pay for the work that they're actually doing in the modern marketplace. And again, it's at the bottom of the scale in most cases. And 5, I do not support privatizing the USPS. I don't think that's necessarily the answer, but maybe it'll have to be if we can't get things straightened out. Come on, people. This is a problem that the government, despite its historic inefficiency, can fix. Let's fix it now. Throughout the U.S., terrorists have fooled the gullible into thinking that Hamas is somehow a force for good, following the unthinkable and cowardly attack on babies, the elderly, and peaceful concert goers. Who is left on earth that is actually fooled? Well, protests in favor of Hamas in certain urban centers, including college campuses and even downtown Houston at City Hall, they reported 1,000 to 2,000 idiots out there and terrorist supporters in front of Houston City Hall last week, indicate that they are either terrorists or dummies running around. I attended the University of Pennsylvania during the time of the Vietnam War protests. As someone who has always opposed communism and repression of human spirit, I never understood the protests and sickness on that campus. I felt like a proverbial duck out of water, having come from a military family as well. Now, fast forward quite some decades, and we have a situation that a major donor to Penn has called on the administration to resign and for alumni to cut off all support until sanity returns. That person is Mark Rowan, who's the CEO of a very successful company, Apollo Global Management, who posted an op-ed. And from all places, this comes from CNN. Yes, not exactly a bastion of conservative thought. Quote, why is UPenn repeating the tragic mistakes of the past? Words of hate and violence must be met with clear, reasoned condemnation, rooted in morality from those in positions of authority, Rowan wrote. Rowan, whose fortune is estimated by Forbes to be nearly $6 billion, is one of the university's wealthiest donors and supporters. He chairs the board of advisors at the university's famed Wharton School and is the latest business leader to slam an Ivy League school over its handling of anti-Semitism in the wake of Hamas' deadly attack on Israel. This mirrored comments about the same time by Bill Ackman, a hedge fund billionaire who called for Harvard University to publicly release the names of students who belong to organizations that signed a letter blaming Israel for last weekend's deadly attack by Hamas. In what alternative universe is someone not a racist for wanting Jewish people to be killed and supporting the racists doing the slaughtering? As I said in a recent episode, this is an attack on civilization itself. Christians and other people of faith are not going to be far behind. Many forget that the Ku Klux Klan, the 3 Ks, stood for Blacks, Jews, and Catholics. That's right, folks, look it up. This is the new KKK. Instead of lynchings, they are slaughtering babies, children, and the elderly. Instead of white hoods, they wear masks on their face. The slaughter by Hamas is not limited to Israeli citizens. In addition to Americans, and there's an estimate of at least 24 already killed, in addition to 12 at least who are hostages, about 12 other countries have lost citizens in this senseless, racist violence. I agree with Mr. Rowan that alumni must shut down all donations to racist colleges. Further, they must refuse to hire those who are overt racist. Think about the exposure for employers who hire people this stupid and this racially biased in a time of ESG and DEI. Yes, let's make it really mean something. We, the American people and civilized people of all religions around the world, must unite to support the end of terrorism and such violent racism. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.